The certified letter landed on my desk on a damp Tuesday morning, sliding through the mail slot at exactly 9:14. I know the precise minute because I later pulled the security footage, watching the carrier drop off the envelope that would dismantle my family. It came from a prestigious law firm downtown, notifying me that I was the sole primary beneficiary of my grandfather, Harrison Eugene Vance. He had passed away 6 weeks prior, buried at a funeral my parents intentionally hid from me. The estate was valued at over $21 million, a staggering figure my parents decided was worth more than their relationship with their own son. My profession in this saga was not a minor detail. It was the exact instrument of justice that brought everything to light. As a specialized estate planning attorney for over a decade, I spend my life drafting bulletproof trusts and reading legal documents with clinical precision. I know exactly how a will operates, and I know the precise loopholes a greedy family will attempt to exploit to erase someone from a legacy. My grandfather Harrison had built his fortune over 40 years in commercial real estate, operating with sharp intuition and a deep respect for the fine print. Harrison was never a falsely affectionate man, but he showed his warmth through absolute consistency, being the only relative to attend my law school graduation. My parents, particularly my mother, handled him with a calculated strategy, suddenly becoming incredibly attentive only when his physical health began to fail. When they moved him into assisted living, my mother eagerly appointed herself as his primary contact, plastering photos of her good deeds all over social media with captions about family. In private, Harrison observed this performance with a quiet, analytical eye, running a mathematical equation in his head that my parents completely underestimated. When Harrison passed away at 81, I only discovered the news days later through an old neighbor who spotted the obituary. My name was entirely omitted from the text, and I was completely excluded from the funeral service, while my parents put on a public show of grief. Instead of reacting with anger, I calmly filed the digital notice away in a secure folder on my computer and waited for the legal process to unfold. The official notification from the executors arrived weeks later, requesting an urgent meeting at a high-rise office downtown to review a trust agreement that was 47 pages long. Harrison had quietly retained an independent firm years earlier, completely bypassing the family attorney to ensure his final wishes were executed without internal interference. The critical amendment to his estate plan had been officially executed just 11 days after my mother had aggressively installed herself as his facility gatekeeper. Harrison had walked into the law firm in secret, rewriting his legacy to name me the beneficiary of 100% of his liquid assets and commercial properties. My parents were left a meager $25,000 each, alongside a private sealed note and a heavy cardboard box. The attorney slid the box across the table, revealing the Black Queen from Harrison's chess set, and a file of documented interference that was 4 inches thick. My parents had secretly attempted to have Harrison declared mentally incompetent, but the evaluation came back, proving he possessed absolute clarity. Harrison had instructed his lawyers to log every aggressive phone call and unauthorized financial inquiry my parents made through the facility administrators. I spent hours reading through his detailed notes, discovering a notarized statement where Harrison explained he was treating his estate planning like a final game of chess. 2 weeks later, my mother called me with an overly sweet tone, inviting me to a family dinner to handle what she called a complicated probate process. At the table, my father spoke authoritatively about the inheritance, as if he were already the executor, while my brother discussed his personal investment strategies. None of them had actually seen the legal will yet, meaning they were building massive financial plans based entirely on a false assumption of victory. As I walked to my car, my mother warned me not to be difficult, falsely claiming she and my father carried the entire burden of his care. I looked at her calmly, asking directly who had authorized the secret mental competency assessment on Harrison, causing her face to go completely pale. 3 weeks after the formal probate notifications were served, my parents called an emergency family meeting in their living room, surrounding me with extended relatives to demand a unified front. My mother sharpened her tone, aggressively claiming that Harrison had been operating under undue influence and that I had manipulated an elderly man experiencing cognitive decline. The entire room grew silent as they waited for my emotional breakdown, but I simply opened my briefcase and placed the evidence on the table. I laid down the original engagement letter, the competency report my parents had ordered, and the massive 4-inch file documenting their corporate interference. Finally, I pulled out Harrison's notarized letter and read aloud his description of how my mother managed his care like a piece of real estate she intended to sell. The room became completely silent as I placed the black chess queen on top of the legal papers and told them I would see them in court. Their subsequent lawsuit was dismissed almost immediately without a hearing, as the probate judge concluded Harrison's intent was entirely beyond dispute. The trust funds dispersed in full, and while my parents received their minor inheritances, the black chess piece now sits permanently on my office desk. I used a significant portion of the fortune to establish a permanent ethics scholarship in Harrison's name and funded a free legal clinic to protect vulnerable seniors. My family spent my entire life mistaking my silence for weakness, never realizing that calm is a strategy, not a surrender. Harrison understood the power of the fine print, and I made sure his final choices were written so clearly that no one could ever erase them. Share your opinion by dropping comments. Like and subscribe my channel if you loved your children.